Hi, I'm Betty, and I'm here to tell you about the day my world turned upside down. I'm 68 years old, and I thought I had everything figured out. I had raised a loving family, built a successful business, and now, in my later years, I was enjoying the peace of retirement. But nothing could have prepared me for the heartbreak that would come in the form of words from my own granddaughter, Jessica. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, sitting at my kitchen table, quietly going through the wedding bills for Jessica's dream wedding. I had promised her that I would make it happen. Anything she wanted, I would help provide. My granddaughter, Jessica, was getting married to a man named Brad, and I wanted her to have the wedding of her dreams. After all, she was the light of my life, my only granddaughter, and I loved her more than anything. But that afternoon, as I sat with the final invoices for the wedding, I overheard something that would forever change the course of our relationship. I was sitting in my kitchen when I heard Jessica's voice drifting through the living room. She was on the phone, and her tone was casual, almost flippant. I had no idea that those simple words she spoke, would shatter my heart and make me reevaluate everything I had done for her. "I hope she dies before the wedding so I don't have to deal with her anymore," Jessica had said, speaking about me. "Then I'd get the inheritance too and could plan the wedding I actually want." I froze. Here I was, sitting at my kitchen table, going through the vendor contracts I had personally signed, $80,000 worth of them, thinking I was doing something good for my granddaughter. I thought I was making her happy. But in that moment, I realized the truth. To Jessica, I was nothing more than a means to an end. I was just a checkbook, a way to fund her dream wedding. I wasn't her grandmother anymore. I was an inconvenience. But it wasn't just that. No, it got worse, much worse. I could hear Jessica's voice growing more animated as she continued. "I wish she'd just pay for everything and stay out of it. She doesn't get it. She keeps giving her opinions, and it's so embarrassing. I can't wait for this wedding to be over so I don't have to deal with her." My heart shattered into a million pieces. I felt as though someone had slapped me across the face. I had been so proud to be able to give her this gift, to make her dream wedding come true. And yet, in return, she didn't want me there at all. She didn't want my love, my advice, or my support. She just wanted my money. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was when she said it, that dreadful, heart-wrenching sentence. "Honestly, I hope she dies before the wedding so I don't have to deal with her anymore." I sat there in stunned silence. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. The granddaughter I had loved and raised, the girl I had spent years nurturing, was wishing for my death? It was time to take action. Let me take a step back and explain how everything led up to this moment. My name is Betty Richardson. I live in Springfield, Missouri. I'm 68 years old, and I've been a widow for 3 years now, ever since my husband Harold passed away from a sudden heart attack. Harold had been a good man, a hard-working man, and when he died, he left me well provided for with life insurance, savings, and a payout house. Jessica was my son Michael's daughter, and she was my only granddaughter. From the day she was born, I adored her. She was the apple of my eye, and I always thought we had a special bond. I had seen her grow up from a little girl into the 24-year-old woman she was today, a marketing coordinator at a local company. When Jessica got engaged to Brad last year, I was overjoyed. I had dreamed of this day, watching her get married and having a beautiful family of her own. When she called me to tell me about the proposal, she was crying with happiness. I was so excited for her, so proud. Now, here we were, months later, planning her wedding. At first, things seemed to be going well. Jessica and Brad wanted a small, intimate wedding, but as they started planning, the dream of a simple ceremony quickly escalated. They had saved up about $5,000, which would have been enough for a modest gathering at the community center with maybe 50 guests. But Jessica kept talking about the perfect wedding she had seen in magazines, elegant flowers, a grand venue, and a lavish reception. I could see how much she wanted it, and my heart ached for her. I wanted to make her happy. I wanted to give her the wedding she dreamed of. So I made a decision. I would help her, no matter the cost. I told her, "Sweetheart, what if Grandma helped make your dream wedding come true?" Her face lit up with pure joy. "Grandma, you do that for me? You're the best," she cried, throwing her arms around me. I smiled, feeling a sense of pride and love. This was my chance to give her something special, something memorable. We spent the next month planning every detail together: the venue, the catering, the flowers, the photographer, the string quartet. All of it, everything she dreamed of. I put down a $15,000 deposit, signed all the contracts, and promised to take care of everything. The final balance was due a month before the wedding. It would be $80,000 for the entire celebration. An extravagant affair. When I told my son Michael and his wife Karen, they were both so grateful. Karen especially was over the moon. She called me every day to thank me, saying that I was making Jessica's dreams come true. Everything seemed perfect. But what I didn't realize was that something sinister was slowly creeping into our relationship. Jessica's behavior started to shift. At first, it was small things, comments here and there that I brushed off. But over time, the dismissive attitude grew more apparent. 2 months into the planning, things started to change. It began with the florist. I suggested adding some white roses to the bridal bouquet, as they had been the flowers at my wedding, and I thought it would be a sweet gesture, connecting our 2 generations. But Jessica immediately dismissed the idea. "Grandma, that's so old-fashioned. We're going for a more modern, elegant look. White roses are from the 1950s. It's not the vibe." I was taken aback, hurt by her words, but I tried to brush it off. After all, it was her wedding, and I was just here to help. But the dismissive attitude continued. Every time I suggested something, it was met with a, "That's not the vibe we're going for," or "My friends would think that's weird." Even when I mentioned that many of my friends were excited to attend, Jessica frowned and said, "We need to keep the guest list manageable. Your friends won't really fit in with our crowd." I had been paying for everything, yet it felt like my opinions and feelings didn't matter. I started to feel like an outsider in the very process I had been so eager to help with. The final straw came when I discovered she had removed not just Ruth, but 6 of my closest friends from the guest list. Ruth, one of my dearest friends, called me to ask why she hadn't received an invitation. I was confused. "Of course you're invited. I gave Jessica your address weeks ago." That's when I found out the truth. Jessica had excluded 6 of my closest friends, friends who had been there for me through Harold's death, who had been with me through thick and thin. She didn't think they were worthy of her fancy wedding. When I confronted Jessica, she shrugged and said, "We needed to make cuts somewhere. And honestly, your friends won't really fit in with our crowd." I felt like I had been slapped in the face. These women had been there for me for decades, and yet, according to Jessica, they weren't good enough for her wedding. She was willing to sacrifice relationships that had meant the world to me in order to keep up appearances. This wasn't the granddaughter I had raised. This wasn't the girl I had always adored. Something had changed, and I didn't know how to fix it. 4 weeks before the wedding, I was supposed to meet Jessica at her apartment to finalize the wedding favors. She had asked me to come by at 2 p.m. to go over the samples together. But when I arrived, I found out the appointment had been moved earlier without anyone telling me. "Oh, didn't I mention it? I figured you didn't need to be there for every little detail." I was hurt, but I let it slide. However, as I stood in her kitchen, I heard Jessica talking to her maid of honor, Sarah, on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help overhearing what she said. "I'm so exhausted from all this wedding planning, and the worst part is dealing with my grandmother." My heart stopped. She was talking about me. She keeps trying to give her opinions about everything: the flowers, the music, the guest list, even the wedding favors. It's so embarrassing. She has these old-fashioned ideas about what a wedding should be like. I was moving, my heart pounding. And then came the worst part. She said, "Honestly, I hope she dies before the wedding so I don't have to deal with her anymore." I sat there in stunned silence. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. The granddaughter I had loved and raised, the girl I had spent years nurturing, was wishing for my death? It was time to take action.
Like, get a hobby, you know? I was shaking now, my heart pounding. And then came the worst part. Sometimes I think about what it would be like if she just wasn't around anymore, Jessica said, casually. Like, if she died tomorrow, I wouldn't have to deal with all her opinions and interference. I'd inherit whatever money she has left. I've been thinking about it. She must have at least $1 million saved up.
I stood there, my hand gripping the kitchen counter as Jessica continued speaking on the phone, oblivious to my presence. The walls around me seemed to close in, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. How could this be happening? How had my granddaughter, the girl I had raised, come to see me as such a burden? Her voice was filled with so much disdain, so much resentment, that it took everything in me not to scream out. But I didn't. I stayed quiet, frozen in place, listening as she calmly planned a future without me in it. She's probably just lonely and desperate for attention, Jessica continued, her tone dismissive, as though I was some irrelevant old woman clinging to the past. She thinks because she ran some little restaurant in the middle of nowhere, she understands contracts and vendor relationships. But she doesn't realize she's locked into all these wedding vendors now. She can't get out of it. I could hardly comprehend what I was hearing. My granddaughter? The girl I had helped raise when my son and daughter-in-law were too busy to be there, was now mocking me, belittling my life's work, my business acumen, and worst of all, my love for her. I'd spent 20 years running Betty's Kitchen, a family restaurant that had been the heart of my life for 2 decades. It wasn't a little restaurant, as she called it. It was a place I had poured my heart and soul into, learning everything from managing vendors to negotiating contracts to ensuring that every detail was perfect for my customers. But to Jessica, it was all just old-fashioned and irrelevant. But here's the thing. She was wrong. She thought I was naive, thought I didn't understand business. She thought I was some helpless old woman who had no idea what she was doing. Well, she was about to learn how wrong she was. As I stood in her kitchen, a calm settled over me. I knew what I had to do. I had spent the last several months pouring my life savings into making her dream wedding come true, but it was clear that I was nothing more than a cash cow to her. The respect I had once hoped for, the gratitude I thought I would receive, had vanished. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. It was time to take control. I wasn't going to let my granddaughter or anyone treat me like this, not after all I had done for her, not after everything I had sacrificed to give her the wedding she wanted. I quietly placed the wedding favor samples on her kitchen counter, wrote a quick note that read, "Had an emergency, will talk later, love, Grandma," and left her apartment. My hands shook as I walked to my car, my mind racing with thoughts. I had just overheard my granddaughter wish for my death. But that wasn't the worst of it. She thought I was trapped. She thought she had me right where she wanted me, helpless, sweet, and too emotional to do anything about it. Well, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. When I got home, I couldn't shake the words I had heard. It was as if they were echoing in my mind, replaying over and over again. I hope she dies before the wedding. Then I'd get the inheritance and plan the wedding I actually want. I sat in my living room staring at the walls, trying to process everything. It was heartbreaking. My own flesh and blood had just calculated my death like a business transaction. But instead of drowning in my sorrow, I made a decision. I was done being the sweet, naive grandmother. I wasn't going to let Jessica take advantage of me anymore. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me just because I loved her. I went to my filing cabinet, an old, reliable friend I had used for years to manage all the business contracts for my restaurant.
I'd always been meticulous when it came to legal documents, and that habit had served me well. I pulled out every single wedding contract I had signed. The venue, the catering company, the florist, the photographer, the limo service, even the string quartet. I spread them across the table and started reading through every one, paying special attention to the cancellation clauses. To my delight, I discovered that every single one of them had a cancellation clause with varying penalty structures. I wasn't just a financial backer of this wedding, I was the primary client. I was the one who signed the contracts, and that meant I had every right to cancel the services. I wasn't trapped. I wasn't powerless. In fact, I was the one holding all the cards. That night, I called my attorney, Robert Chen, the same man who had helped me with Harold's estate. He had always been a reliable advisor, and I needed his expertise. "Robert," I said when he answered, "I need your advice on something. I've got a few wedding contracts, and I'm considering canceling them. Can you help me navigate this?" "Of course, Betty. What's going on?" Robert asked. I explained everything, leaving out the details about Jessica's comments. I just told him that I wanted to understand my rights as the primary client on these contracts. "Well, Betty, it sounds like you're in a good position," Robert said after reviewing the details. "As the primary client, you have every right to cancel the services. You'll lose your deposits, but you won't be responsible for any additional payments. Just make sure you follow the cancellation procedures outlined in the contracts." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't stuck. I wasn't trapped. I had the power to take control of the situation, and I wasn't going to let Jessica's cruelty continue. The next morning, I called my banker, Helen Morrison. Helen had been handling my account since I opened Betty's kitchen, and she knew my financial situation inside and out. "Helen, I need to know my exact liquid assets," I said when she answered. "I'm considering making some changes to my financial commitments." After a few moments of silence, Helen pulled up my accounts. "Betty, between your savings, CDs, and money market accounts, you have about $450,000 in liquid assets. And that doesn't include the value of your house, which is worth about $300,000. Plus, you recently inherited $400,000 from your sister Elizabeth." I was stunned. I had more than I thought. I had over $800,000 in liquid assets, not including the house. Jessica had guessed that I had at least $1 million saved up, but what she didn't know was that I had recently inherited a substantial amount of money from my sister. I didn't need to continue paying for a wedding that wasn't even wanted by the bride anymore. I was ready to cancel everything. I spent the next few days meticulously going through every contract, calculating the costs and the consequences of canceling each one. The math was simple. Lose $15,000 in deposits, save $65,000 in final payments, a net savings of $50,000. But more importantly, this was about dignity. This was about respect. I refused to continue funding a wedding for someone who wished I were dead. I called Robert again, and we worked through the details of the cancellations. Robert prepared the necessary documents, and I set about canceling the wedding vendors one by one. The first vendor I called was the venue, Maple Ridge Country Club, where Jessica had dreamed of having her wedding reception. I called Mrs. Patterson, the events coordinator, and calmly informed her that I needed to cancel the event. "Oh no, Mrs. Richardson, I'm so sorry to hear that," Mrs. Patterson said when I explained the situation. "You'll forfeit your deposit, but the remaining payments won't be necessary." One by one, I called the caterers, the florist, the photographer, and all the other vendors. They were sympathetic, but they all confirmed the same thing. I'd lose the deposits, but I wouldn't be responsible for the remaining balances. In the end, I had canceled $80,000 worth of wedding services, and I had saved $65,000 in the process. It felt empowering. Jessica didn't take the news well. It started with the phone call. She was frantic, barely able to speak through her tears. "Grandma, I just got the strangest call from Maple Ridge Country Club. They said you canceled the reception, but that can't be right, can it?" "There's no mistake, Jessica. I canceled all the wedding vendors yesterday. What? But why? What happened? I could hear her panic in her voice, and a part of me felt sorry for her, but I knew I had made the right choice. I heard your conversation with Sarah on Tuesday, the one where you said you hoped I would die before the wedding. I heard you say that if I died, you would inherit my money and get to plan the wedding you actually wanted. There was a long pause on the other end of the phone. Silence. Then Jessica spoke, her voice trembling. Grandma, I didn't mean it. I was just frustrated. No, Jessica. You didn't just say it in frustration. You said it in cold calculation. You talked about my death like it was a solution to your problems. I could feel her guilt through the phone, but I didn't let it sway me. This wasn't about revenge. It was about standing up for myself, for my own dignity. I'm sorry, Grandma. Please don't do this. Please don't ruin my wedding. I'm not ruining your wedding, Jessica. You wanted to plan it without my interference, and now you can. That was the end of it. The wedding was off in the way Jessica had envisioned it, but not in the way that she had hoped. Instead of spending my days worrying about a wedding that had fallen apart, I decided to focus on myself. I booked a luxury cruise to Alaska, something I had always wanted to do but never felt I could afford. It was the first time in years I had done something for myself, and it felt incredible. While Jessica was scrambling to make sense of her canceled wedding, I was watching glaciers from the deck of my cruise ship, enjoying every minute of the life I had built and relishing in my newfound freedom. When I returned home, there was a thank you card from Jessica waiting for me. It was simple, with a photo of her and Brad at their community center wedding. The card read, "Dear Grandma, thank you for everything you taught me about respect and consequences. I understand now why you made the decision you did. I hope someday I can earn back your trust and your love. Love, Jessica." It wasn't much, but it was something. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about the wedding. It was about reclaiming my power and dignity and understanding that I am worthy of respect, no matter my age. 3 months later, I updated my will. Jessica's inheritance went to several charities, and I established a scholarship fund for young women starting their own businesses. My decision was clear. My money, my choice, my dignity. And I sleep peacefully knowing that I don't fund people who wish me dead. As the days passed, I couldn't help but replay everything in my mind. I had made the decision to cancel the wedding, to walk away from something that I thought would bring joy. But it wasn't just about the wedding. It was about what I had learned about myself, about my worth, and about the people I loved. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought about Jessica, the girl I had spent my life raising, guiding, and loving. The girl I had taken care of when she was sick, helped with her schoolwork, and celebrated her milestones. I had given her everything, my time, my energy, my resources. And this was how she repaid me? By wishing for my death? The pain of those words hit me like a punch to the gut. But the more I reflected on it, the more I realized how much power I still had. Not in the form of wealth or status, but in my sense of self. I had allowed Jessica to take me for granted for far too long, but I wasn't going to let anyone, treat me as though I was invisible, just a means to an end. I was Betty Richardson, a woman who had built a successful restaurant, who had navigated the tough waters of business, and who had done everything she could for her family. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. It became clear. The lesson wasn't just about money. It was about respect. It was about standing up for myself. And it was about understanding that no one, not even family, had the right to treat me with disrespect. Once I had made the decision to cancel the wedding, a strange sense of freedom washed over me. I wasn't constantly worried about whether Jessica was happy with the plans or if she was going to be mad at me for suggesting something she didn't like. I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if I was going to be dismissed or ignored. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. The weight of responsibility for the wedding and the pressure I had put on myself to make it perfect for Jessica was gone. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I could focus on things that brought me joy, things that mattered to me. I booked the Alaska cruise I had always dreamed of taking, something I had put off for so long because I never felt it was the right time. But now, it was time. Time to take care of myself. I'd spent so many years putting others first, my family, my restaurant, my employees, even my customers. I had always been there for everyone else, and now I realized it was time to be there for myself. I deserved that. The Alaska cruise was nothing short of magical. I saw glaciers, had quiet moments of reflection on the deck, and met new friends who shared my sense of adventure. I had everything I needed within me. I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth. As I sat on the deck, watching the vast expanse of icebergs float by, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't just the scenery, it was the freedom, the liberation, the ability to finally live for myself without being tethered to the expectations of others. When I returned home, the first thing I found in my mailbox was a thank you card from Jessica. It was a simple card with a photograph of her and Brad standing together in front of a modest backdrop at their community center wedding. They looked happy, but the image was far from the grand spectacle that had been promised. I opened the card slowly, not knowing what to expect. The words inside were brief but sincere. Dear Grandma, thank you for everything you taught me about respect and consequences. I understand now why you made the decision you did. I hope someday I can earn back your trust and your love. Love, Jessica. I read the words over and over, my emotions swirling. A part of me wanted to reach out, to forgive her, to pretend like everything was fine. But another part of me knew that forgiveness would have to come on my terms. I had spent my life loving her, supporting her, and teaching her, but now it was time for her to learn the most important lesson of all, respect. I kept the card, but I didn't immediately call her. Some lessons take time to sink in. I needed to make sure Jessica truly understood what she had lost, and more importantly, what she had taken for granted. 3 months later, I made a decision that solidified my sense of self-worth. I sat down and updated my will. I had initially planned to leave a substantial inheritance to Jessica, the girl I had loved more than anything. But after everything that had transpired, I realized something important. She hadn't earned it. Instead, I decided to redirect my money. Jessica's inheritance would go to several charities that were close to my heart. I also established a scholarship fund for young women who were starting their own businesses, hoping that my experience and resources would help others build the kind of future that Jessica had so casually dismissed. It was a moment of clarity. My money was mine to decide how to use, and I was no longer willing to fund people who didn't appreciate me, who saw my love and support as an inconvenience. I had learned that love is not about constant sacrifice, and sometimes the best way to love someone is to let them face the consequences of their actions. I wasn't going to enable bad behavior any longer. I wasn't going to let anyone, especially Jessica, take advantage of my kindness. The final blow came when I received a wedding invitation from Jessica. It was a simple card, printed on plain cardstock. No glossy, expensive paper, no intricate design, just a simple invite to a modest ceremony at the local community center. The wedding she ended up having was nothing like the dream she had initially sold me on. I didn't attend the wedding. I wasn't going to pretend everything was okay. Instead, I was on a luxury cruise in Alaska, experiencing the kind of life I had always dreamed of but never allowed myself to have. I wasn't sad that I wasn't there for Jessica's wedding. I wasn't angry. I was simply at peace, knowing that I had made the right choice. Jessica had made it clear that she didn't value me or the sacrifices I made for her. She didn't appreciate the love I had given her, and she certainly didn't deserve my continued financial support. But I wasn't bitter. I was free. The cruise was everything I needed. It was the opportunity to reclaim my dignity, to experience life on my own terms, and to focus on my own happiness for once. And when I returned home, I found a new sense of peace. I had done something for myself that I had never done before. I had stood up for my own dignity, and in doing so, I had let go of the weight of my family's expectations. When I got home, I found a thank you card from Jessica in my mailbox. It was simple, heartfelt, and apologized for her actions. She said she understood why I had made the decision I had, and she hoped one day to earn back my trust. I didn't immediately pick up the phone to call her. I wasn't sure I was ready to have that conversation yet, but as time went on, I realized something. The lesson had been learned, at least on some level. I thought about how in the past I had put everyone else's needs before mine. I had always given without expecting anything in return. I had loved Jessica with all my heart, and I had been willing to sacrifice everything for her. But now I had learned the importance of setting boundaries, of protecting my dignity, and of knowing when to stop giving. Jessica's apology was a start, but it wasn't the end. Trust takes time to rebuild, and I wasn't in a hurry to rush that process. But for the first time in a long time, I felt empowered. My money, my dignity, my choices, they were all mine. And that was the greatest gift I could give myself. As time passed, I found that things began to settle. It wasn't that the hurt had completely disappeared, but the weight of it started to lift. The sting of Jessica's words, the cold, calculating way she had talked about my death, began to dull as I focused on myself. I had made a bold decision, one that I had never imagined I would need to make. But in the end, it was the best decision I could have made for myself. For so long, I had been the one to give my time, my energy, my money. It had always been about everyone else. And it's not that I resented it. I loved helping my family, especially Jessica. But somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of something important, myself. Now it was time to rebuild my life, my peace, and my boundaries. It was time for Betty Richardson to take center stage. I had spent so many years as a caretaker, a giver, a doer, and now I was ready to be all of those things for myself. I started small. I reorganized my home, rearranged the furniture in a way that felt more me. I went through old photo albums and reminisced about the restaurant days, the moments of triumph, the late nights, the challenges, and the victories. I was proud of what I had built. Betty's Kitchen hadn't just been a restaurant, it had been a reflection of me. And when I closed its doors, I didn't just walk away from a business. I walked away from a huge chapter of my life. But that chapter was closed, and it was time for a new one to begin. I began taking more time for myself. I started going on walks through the neighborhood in the mornings, just enjoying the calm, listening to the birds, breathing in the fresh air. I had never realized how much I had neglected those simple pleasures, the little things that were so easily overlooked when you're constantly looking out for others. I also joined a local book club. I had always loved reading, but had never found the time in the hustle of raising my family and running a business. Now I had the time. I made new friends, women who were not tied to the expectations of family or obligations, but who were genuinely interested in the same things I was. thoughtful conversation, books, art, and simple joys. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of belonging to something that wasn't tied to my past roles of wife, mother, or grandmother. I was Betty, just Betty, and it felt wonderful. As the months passed, I found myself thinking about Jessica less. She had been a major part of my life for so long. But after her words and actions, I realized I couldn't continue to sacrifice my well being for someone who wasn't ready to appreciate it. Yet, there were moments when I thought about her, when memories of the girl I had raised flooded my mind. I remembered the days of her childhood, the laughter, the joy, the love we had shared. I remembered how, as a young woman, she had been so full of promise, so full of life, and how proud I was to see her grow. But now, as an adult, I saw the person she had become, a person who didn't value those who had loved her the most. The more I reflected on our relationship, the more I realized how important it was to maintain my boundaries. And I began to understand that setting boundaries wasn't just about protecting myself, it was also about teaching others how to respect me. I wasn't angry anymore, not really, but I wasn't going to forget what had happened. I wasn't going to sweep it under the rug, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. I heard from Michael and Karen from time to time. Michael especially kept trying to get me to let it go, to forgive Jessica, to accept her apology and move on. He told me that Jessica was young, that she was stressed about the wedding, that she didn't mean what she had said. He kept pushing for me to make amends. But I knew that forgiveness could only come when Jessica truly understood the gravity of her actions. And then, one day, Jessica called. Her voice was tentative, hesitant, completely different from the one I had heard on the phone that day, the voice that was cold, dismissive, and full of disdain. This voice was apologetic, almost scared. "Grandma, I've been thinking about everything, and I owe you an apology, a real one. I was wrong. I said things I shouldn't have. I didn't understand how much I was hurting you, and I just want you to know I'm sorry. I know I can't take back what I said, but I hope we can find a way to move forward." I listened carefully, cautiously. She had done something I never thought would happen. She had owned her mistake. She had finally realized the weight of her words, and in doing so, she had taken the first step towards understanding what I had gone through. But I wasn't ready to jump back into our old relationship. It would take time for the trust to be rebuilt. I had learned that much about myself. "I appreciate your apology, Jessica," I said calmly, my voice steady. "But I think we both know that rebuilding trust takes time. I need some space, and I need to see that you understand the full extent of what you said and that you've learned from it. I hope one day we can move forward, but it will take time." There was silence on the other end of the line. And then softly, she responded, "I understand, Grandma. I really do. I just hope you'll be willing to give me that chance." "I'm not sure when that will be, Jessica, but I'll think about it." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of peace. I had made the right decision. I had given her the chance to grow, to apologize, and to take responsibility for her actions. But I wasn't ready to let her back into my life just yet. In the months that followed, I continued living my life, focusing on the things that brought me joy and peace. I had let go of the need for validation from anyone, especially Jessica. It was liberating. I took more trips, visited old friends, and indulged in hobbies I had put off for years. I found new ways to connect with myself. And most importantly, I found peace in letting go of the things that no longer served me. I thought back to the Alaska cruise, the freedom I felt there, and how it had marked the beginning of something new for me. I had learned the value of standing up for myself, of setting my boundaries, and of understanding that my dignity was more important than anything else. And then, one day, I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't from Jessica. It wasn't from my family. It was from a charity I had recently donated to, thanking me for my contribution. The letter ended with the note that made me smile. Your gift will help change the lives of many young women, giving them the opportunity to build the businesses and lives they've always dreamed of. Thank you for your generosity and vision. I looked at the letter for a long time. I realized that even though Jessica would not be receiving the inheritance I had once planned for her, my legacy was still being passed on. Through the scholarship fund I had set up, the money was being used to help young women build their dreams, just like I had built mine with Betty's Kitchen. I had found a new way to give, a way that felt true to who I was and what I stood for. Years have passed since the wedding drama. Jessica and I have exchanged a few letters, and we have talked on the phone occasionally. The relationship is still tentative, but it's there. Slowly, we are rebuilding, but it's on my terms now. The most important lesson I've learned through all of this is that self-respect isn't something that can be given to you. It's something you have to claim for yourself. I've learned that sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes generosity means stopping the flow of money to people who don't appreciate it. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to learn from their mistakes and face the consequences. I sleep well at night knowing that I've reclaimed my dignity and that I've made choices that reflect who I truly am, not just as a grandmother, but as a woman who knows her worth.